Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt, back for another episode of One Gallon Brewing. Today we brew an American Pale Ale. So let's go. Alright gang, we got another fun beer to brew today. If you saw the last video, the Amarillo video, you saw I threw kind of a curveball in and we went with the Kviek ale yeast over a traditional ale yeast. I explained at the time that living out in Las Vegas in the heat of the summer, just keeping my house cool is really tough. And so keeping the temperature to where a traditional ale yeast could ferment comfortably on my counter was not an option. Most ale yeast don't like to go over the mid-70s. Kviek yeast gives you more room. Kviek yeast works great up into the mid-80s, even up to 90, without imparting any funky flavors or stressing out the yeast. So we went with the Kviek yeast there. We'll stick with the Kviek yeast because summertime in Vegas. But we're going to throw you another curveball today. As you might notice, I've got a little mish bag in my pot. We're going to try something called the brew in the bag method. If you've seen the other videos, you notice I've got multiple pots. I'm heating water in different places. I'm straining. We're rinsing grains. That's easy enough on the 1 gallon level, but when you get a little bigger, it's a little more work. But we're going to make your life simpler, and we're going to do this all in one container now. This mesh bag works as our kind of strainer, colander, what have you, and we're going to get to do everything in one container. This is probably a method we're going to use a lot in the future. Does it affect the flavor of the beer? No, you still make great beers this way. We're still doing all grain brews. There's plenty of homebrewers winning homebrew competitions with the brew in the bag. This, again, is just a different method to make our life easier, and if you watch the channel, you know I'm all about that. Real quick, let's talk about our brew and our mash bill. First off, because we're doing everything in one container, in the past I had like 1 gallon in one pot and 3 quarts in another pot, for a total of 7 quarts of water. We're going to end up going with about 9 liters on this brew. It's going to be a little more water than what we're dealing with. Researching this and just in theory, a lot of times we were coming up with 1 gallon post-boil volume, which means you're basically pitching the whole thing into your fermenter to get you 1 gallon of beer. Well, that meant a lot of the trub and stuff, the hop matter and stuff was going into your fermenter. The additional water volume allows you to not have to pour all that stuff on the bottom into your fermenter to get you a gallon of beer. So that's the adjustment of the water volume. What does that mean for you? That probably means you might need a bigger pot than you've used. If you've done these other brews that I've done previously, you might need a little bigger pot because I've always said you want plenty of headspace to avoid boil over. This is the traditional 12-quart pot I've always used. This is a 16-quart pot. So you might want to bump up the size of pot. Real quick, let's go over the mash bill before we get started. 2 pounds of pale 2-row malt, 4 ounces of Cara malt 30 Lovibond. Now I want to make an addendum. My local brew shop had the 20 and the 40 Lovibond, but not a 30. He suggested, well, you can do a little bit of both. I was like, just give me the 40, because I was going to use it in some other brews. So I'm like, just give me the 40. Just give me the 40. So I have 4 ounces of Cara malt 40 Lovibond, and then 2 ounces of Cara pills or Dextrin. Those terms are kind of interchangeable in the mash bill. So that's our mash bill for our American Pale Ale. And one quick thing before we get started. American Pale Ale versus British Pale Ale. You might have heard the terms. Basically, it's just the difference between the hops. The British use the classic noble hops from Europe. They're a little more subtle, a little more floral. In American Pale Ale, we're going to use those more aggressive, citrusy, piney American hops. So that's the difference. Well, with that being said, let's brew an American Pale Ale. Alright gang, so we've heated 9 liters of water to 160 degrees. We're still using the same temperatures, mashing, what have you. We're just doing this all in one pot. So I've got my 9 liters up to 160 degrees, and we're just going to pour in our grain. We're going to do it a little slower in the bag because you don't want it to get in the nooks and crannies of the bag and get dough balls and what have you. So I'm going to take it a little slower on the dumping of the grains. Also, too, a quick little note, you don't necessarily want this bag on the bottom of your skillet if possible. It will sink a little bit, but not much. Just to avoid any potential scorching, even though, again, with this much water, we shouldn't have too much of an issue. So when we get this all stirred in, we're going to put our lid on, kill the flame, and we're going to let this sit for 1 hour, and we'll come back to do our mash out. Alright gang, so it's been 1 hour, and we're ready to do our mash out. It's going to be fairly similar to the other way we do it, except we're not going to have another pot of water going. We're just going to kick back on the heat, and we're going to raise the temperature up to 170 degrees, and then when we do that, we'll go ahead and pull the grain bag or whatever. So we'll come back when it's 170 degrees. Alright gang, so we've raised our temperature up to 170, and now we're at the mash out. We're going to go ahead and kill the heat, and now comes the best part to this method. This is how we're going to rinse the grains. You just pull the bag out. A colander like this is handy. If you want to hold it like this, feel free, but again, let's not make too much work for ourselves. And voila, we're going to allow this to drip till it's dry, and then we can dispose of the grains. Again, makes it real easy, and we will come back for our boil. Alright gang, so our boil started. We're doing a traditional 60-minute boil. We're going to do our first hop addition. It is 0.1 ounce of Citra hops. We're just going to pitch her right in. And you can see we're already getting a little hot break. I'll just give her a quick little stir. Oh, I can already smell them hops. Very nice. So we'll come back in 45 minutes for our next hop addition. Alright gang, time for our second hop addition. With about 15 minutes left in the boil, we are going to add 0.1 ounces of Citra hops and 0.15 ounces of Amarillo hops. So let's go ahead and pitch those in. And then we'll come back with 1 minute left in the boil to add our last hop addition. Alright, so with 1 minute left in the boil, we're going to do our last hop addition. It's going to be 0.1 ounces of Citra hop and 0.15 ounces of Amarillo hop. Go ahead and pitch those in. And we're going to finish up the boil here, and then we'll get ready to put in our ice bath. Alright gang, we got our ice bath going, and I want to talk about something real quick, or give you a little technique that'll help you on a couple of different levels. A, help you cool down your wort a little faster, and B, get more oxygen in there. Basically, just take the spoon that you're using to, stir in the hops or whatever, and make sure it's sanitized, clean or whatever, and go in here and just give it a good vigorous stir while the steam's coming off. This helps to cool the wort down faster, get out any hot pockets of liquid. Also too, you help kind of whip in more oxygen, which is important for when we pitch the yeast at first. So again, this is kind of a win-win. We're cooling our wort faster, but we're also adding oxygen. So I just want to show you this real quick. I'm going to let this cool down. We'll pitch our yeast and we'll come back to wrap up. Well, alright gang, real quick to wrap up. It has become apparent that we had a little too much water. I reviewed that recipe several times, and I've used recipes from that source, and I always got decent results. 9 liters of water is probably too much. I would do 8 instead. The reason is because we missed our gravity mark. Our projected gravity, the projected ABV for this beer is 5.5%. The projected starting gravity was going to be 1.055. We are in the 1.04s. We could still get, if we get a real good clean fermentation down to 1.00, we could still get close to 5, but we're not going to hit the mid 5s on ABV, and it's too watered down. I should, in all honesty, I've done enough beers where I probably should have kind of realized that. This is something you'll learn over time. That's why I kind of bring the whole thing up, because these things will happen. I reread the recipe, this, that, and the other. I followed it to a T. And again, they kind of explain why they have an extra volume, but 9 liters is too much. 8 liters is probably fine for this batch. Real quick, let's review that recipe besides the water part. Our mash bill: 2 pounds of pale 2-row malt, 4 ounces of Cara malt. I used the 40 Lovabond. The original recipe is 30, but you know, in that range. 2 ounces of Cara pills or Dextrin. Our hop additions, we had 3 hop additions. 1 at 60 minutes, 0.1 ounces of Citra hop. At 15 minutes left in the boil, we did 0.1 ounces of Citra hop, 0.15 ounces of Amarillo. At 1 minute left in the boil, we did 0.1 ounces of Citra hops, 0.15 ounces of Amarillo. We used the Kviek yeast. We're going to do 2 weeks in primary, 2 weeks in secondary, a week bottling condition. In about a month, we will have a beer ready to go. Real quick, like I said, the projected ABV on this beer was 5.5. The projected IBUs is 47. So that's probably going to get skewed too, but just throwing it out there. Real quick on the Kviek yeast, if you do regular gravity readings, you can go from primary to secondary in 10 days. At the time of the shooting, the amber ale that we did in the previous video is getting ready to bottle, and I noticed that Kviek yeast did a pretty quick job in primary, so you could possibly move into secondary a little earlier. Well, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you'd like me to brew, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.